I didn't buy my wife jewelry. She cheated to get back at me. I left her and took almost everything. I'm going to try to write this with as much of a level head as I can muster. But to be perfectly honest, I'm furious. If there's one thing that I hate, it is entitlement. Sometimes people are actually entitled to things, but when you're not, and you think you are, it is the fastest way to piss me off and make me not like you anymore. The problem now is that the person who is entitled right now is my wife. Under normal circumstances, I will let that slide. But the real problem is what happened after her entitlement. That's the whole reason I'm writing all of this, because our marriage is definitely over. Some background that you need is that I, 37 male, met her 33 female 6 years ago. When I went with a vacation group to Switzerland, during the trip, she seemed like a perfectly reasonable young woman. She wanted to learn more about the places we visited. She didn't take an obnoxious amount of pictures of herself, and when we talked, the conversation genuinely seemed intelligent. She was pretty too, so that part didn't hurt at all. I got her number before we headed back home at the end of the trip, and while we chatted, I didn't ramp things up, like until a few months later. She was about 2 states away, so I arranged and went to visit her. She showed me around her city, and we had a great time. It was then that I was sure I was going to shoot my shot at her. And I did that. Right before I headed back, she said yes. I was ecstatic. And that was the start of our relationship. We visited each other about twice every month for a couple of days. And despite the whole thing being long distance, we made it work even when we started to have those stupid fights that long-distance couples have. She was reasonable enough for those fights not to blow out of proportion. Again, there was very little I could see about her that I could say was a red flag, and a promise that I looked out for. Then, she worked in marketing at a relatively big company, and she was really good at what she did. I work in web dev, and I earn a lot more than she. But she's not doing badly for herself anyway. About 2 years into dating, I decided I wanted to marry her. So I proposed, she said yes, and then 6 months after that, we tied the knot. Everyone's happy, right? I mean, I thought we were, and it seemed that we were for the longest time. But looking back, I can see exactly when the problem started. Hindsight is 20/20, as they say. When we got married, she requested for a transfer to my city, and her company gave it to her. So we finally moved in together at that point, and she began to work with an entirely new team of people. And it seems to be those people who caused her to become the way she is now. She was never a very demanding girlfriend, and even in the early stages of marriage, I didn't quite notice that with her, either. She was always thankful of the things I did for her, even the smaller gestures. Even when I started earning a lot more, she was never entitled. But yeah, all of that changed when she started hanging around these new girls at work. There were 2 of them in particular, and the moment they became friends, and she'd come home and tell me stories about them I disapproved. I've seen them several times, but that was after I knew about them, and it was hard for me to get rid of the bias I had against them. They were fun people, no doubt, but I didn't like the influence that I felt. They could have on my wife for a long time. It didn't seem as if she had changed in any way. She was still the woman I had fallen in love with, so there wasn't anything for me to really complain about. I assumed that she was smart enough to handle herself and not be pressured into doing anything stupid. They mostly went to restaurants and karaoke bars when they had to hang out. I let her go to a club with them once, but she came back a bit too intoxicated for my liking. So after that point, I told her that I wasn't going to let that happen anymore, and she didn't fight me over it. This is part of the reason why I've always trusted her. However, she started to go out more and more. As far as I knew, she wasn't going to clubs, but her outfits were changing. She used to dress hot while not showing too much skin. But these days her outfits are getting shorter and more revealing. We had several arguments over that, but for the most part, we would reach some form of compromise. But I knew her. Friends were to blame for her trying to dress like that. Now let me cut to the chase. When her 3rd wedding anniversary was coming up, she told me that there was something she really wanted. I had no reason to think it was going to be something unreasonable, because the gifts she always asked for were somewhat grounded. Well, she said she wanted a Van Cleef bracelet at the time. I had no idea what that was when I searched it. I saw Van Cleef as a luxury jewelry brand, and their options are expensive, but There were a few that were around the $1, 500 mark, and I felt like I could do that for her. Especially as an anniversary gift later that week, I brought up Van Cleef, and I talked about how beautiful that her jewelry was. And she agreed. It was at that point she decided to let me know that it was a specific design she wanted. And she said it was the 5-clovered vintage Alhambra design with malachite, which she said was green. I didn't know any of those words before the whole episode started, but now I will never forget them at night. I went to check the price, and I saw what she wanted was about $6. Yet zero. I almost lost my mind, because sure, it was a wedding anniversary, but it was only a third wedding anniversary. And if I was going to spend that much on one gift this year, what was she going to expect me to do the next year? Part of me realized that she had never asked for much from me before, so I knew she must have really wanted it. I knew I couldn't pay that much though, so I started to look at other places I could buy it from, even if it would be second-hand. I was willing to go as high as $3 if I could find a good deal, but even on eBay, respected sellers were above $4,000 on it, and at that point, I would have closed my eyes to get it new. I know nothing about buying jewelry, so laugh at me if you must have no idea how they hold value. I even went into town to the jewelers to see if they had it, or if they could give me any advice, but most said it would be hard to find the malachite bracelet with my budget. They said I'd be best convincing her to settle for an Alhambra bracelet of a different kind. So I tried to do that when I got home, but she was insistent that she only wanted that kind. In fact, she started to get agitated about it, like my refusal to simply drop $6, a zero, was irritating her. We ended up sleeping that night without resolving things. And meanwhile, I had about a week left until our anniversary. The conversation came up 2 other times, and while the first was somewhat civil, she completely lost it. On me. The second time, she was actually pissed. And apart from talking about how she had never asked me for anything expensive before, she made it known that her girls had similar 5-clovered bracelets, and she was the only one who didn't. I said that they were single women with no responsibilities who were likely getting these expensive bracelets on someone else's payroll. She asked why she couldn't get it on my payroll when I earned so much, and I had made it clear that it was because the bracelet was too freaking expensive. The most expensive watch I have is just a little under $2. No zero. And I was splurging when I bought it. I was ready to spend more than that on her. But the part that was pissing me off was that she was refusing to compromise. Van Cleef has so many other beautiful bracelets within my budget, but she was being so stubborn about it because she didn't want to be left out of her girls' club. She's never been so prone to peer pressure as far as I know, but I guess she wanted to fit in with the cool kids that badly. We didn't resolve that fight before we went. To bed, it was so bad that I slept in the guest bedroom. It was an absolute mess. And that was only a couple of days before our anniversary. The next day she went out to work as she would usually, and even though we barely spoke to each other, I didn't think everything was about to flip upside down. At that point, she came home later than usual that day, wearing a different outfit than she had left in. But she claimed that she had gone out with the girls after work, and it was pre-planned. So she had brought a change of clothes with her. No alarm bells went off that day, but they should have, because the time was later than usual. Even when she went to hang out with the girls, things were sour up until her anniversary day. And when that day came, I made a conscious effort for us to get over her issues from the previous days. I started the day with flowers and chocolates for her. We went to work, and then I picked her up and took her to a fine dining restaurant that she had been saying she wanted to go to for some time at the end of the day. I surprised her with a necklace. It wasn't Van Cleef, because it felt like it would have been too much of a compromise on what she really wanted that way. I hugged her, kissed her, and told her that I was going to get her that bracelet one day, because I was just trying to be a loving husband, and I didn't want us to fight over something like that. She cheered up a little, but it still felt a little off in my head. I hoped that I was able to salvage our anniversary. I was even prepared to start saving up money towards the bracelet on a monthly basis. That night, she was on her phone a lot, after we got back up until she went to bed. I wanted to see her honest opinion of the day, and I knew The only people she would have told the honest truth to were her girlfriends. So I went into their group chat, and that's when it all fell apart. She mentioned that I said I was going to get the bracelet for her, and her friends seemed to be happy about that. She admitted that the day was pretty nice despite the fact that we were fighting. That was what I came to see, but I kept reading. And then it went on into one of her friends asking what she was going to do, considering I had agreed to buy the bracelet. I mean, after the other night, it was clear something had happened related to the bracelet. And it was only when I went up into the chat that I got the full context. When we had the last fight over the bracelet, she went to talk to her friends about it. She was so pissed off at me because according to her, I had more than enough money to do. That one thing for her, she kept emphasizing that she never asked me for anything. And the one time that she did, I couldn't deliver all her friends did was fuel her anger. They didn't even try to rein her in. Or anything. My wife proposed that they hit the club the next day, and her friends were surprised and asked whether I'd be okay with that. She said she didn't care, that defying me was going to make her feel better to her. It was a way of getting revenge on me for upsetting her because I refused to buy the bracelet. It was that day that she packed a change of clothes. The clothes she came back in weren't too crazy, but the pictures they shared to the page had her wearing something entirely different. I'm not going to hold back, and I'll simply say she would never have worn something like that. If I knew, and I'm sure she borrowed it from one of her friends a few hours before she came home that night. One of her friends texted, saying that she wasn't picking her phone and then asked, "Did you go home with that guy?" There was no answer until an hour later when she just replied to that question with a blushing emoji. At that point, her friends started losing it in the messages. There was only one, "Are you sure it was a good idea?" But Mo's response was, "I'm angry at him and I feel better now." So yes, that part sent me over the edge. She cheated on me because she was angry that I didn't buy her a bracelet that was $6,000. Do you know how ridiculous that would sound to people? We're not rich, we're not wealthy. We're comfortable and we're trying to get more comfortable, and buying a $3,000 bracelet was such a big compromise for her that she refused to take it. She let that piss her off to the extent that she chose to cheat on me with some random guy at the club, and she had zero remorse about it because it felt like the perfect get back. Since I pissed her off, I know I couldn't hold it in. I documented as much of the relevant parts of the chat history as I could, and then I went to wake her up as soon as I saw her stirs. Stuck the screen of her phone in her face. It took almost half a minute for her vision to clear enough to see what I was showing her, and as soon as it clicked, she snatched the phone from me and sat up immediately. She had no idea how to react in that moment. She just held her phone tight and was staring at it. I shouted at her to look at me, but she couldn't. I really wished that I didn't have to have that confrontation at the end of what was supposed to be a relatively good night, I thought. We escaped the mess of the stupid bracelet arguments, only to be in a marriage-ending position because of that same bracelet argument. If I hadn't decided to check the phone, I might not have ever known. So because you were pissed at me, the proper revenge in your own book was to go and be in the club and cheat on me. She was just cowering in the bed as I said all of that, and it was annoying. I shouted her to say something, but she just whimpered. I imagine I was very scary in that moment, because I've never been as furious in my life. I told her that if she had nothing to say, she could get out at that point. She whimpered in, "I'm sorry," and tried to say something else, but she didn't have the guts to. I told her to pack her bags and leave. I said I'd give her 20 minutes and she'd get the rest of her stuff on a much later date. But I needed her out of there immediately. She didn't. Put up a fight. She started packing her things, and when I saw her pick up the box of the necklace I had just bought her, I snatched it away. I told her there was no way I was going to give her that anymore. She almost put up a fight, but I suppose she decided against it, which was a smart move. I knew I was going to return it. The very next day, she eventually finished packing, and as she headed toward the door, she stopped and looked at me for a long time. I don't know if she wanted to say something, or if she thought I was going to say something before she left, but I had nothing to say. We just looked at each other until she decided to walk out. I haven't seen her since then, and I'm glad I had her served with divorce papers. I hope that process will go smoothly. She's certainly not going to want to leave with anything, but I'm going to do my best to make sure that's exactly how things go. Update. Divorce is such a horrible process when you have a couple that's not amicably splitting it. Can get so messy. It certainly was in my case when we tried to negotiate. I made it very clear to her lawyer that I wanted her to get absolutely nothing. He said she was entitled to half. I told her I was not going to let a cheating woman take half of what I own. He claimed that I couldn't prove that she had cheated. I told him I had all the screenshots of her admitting it, and that was news to the two of them. Even though their stance weakened a little, they still wanted way more than I was willing to give away. So as expected, we took it to the judge from there. Things got even more stressful. There was a lot of back and forth with each attorney trying to amplify the other side's negative traits to an almost criminal extent. The judge saw through most of that. Thankfully, we kept hammering on the cheating part though, because I expected that we would still have been a happily married couple if she hadn't done what she did. There was no reason to reward her when it was her choice. That led to the point. We were all just in the end, while I was able to get away with the house, our car, a bunch of valuable things in our home, and most of my money, minus a big fee for the lawyer. I was ordered to provide spousal support for the next few years, and that's the part that drives me nuts. I really wanted nothing to do with this woman because she'll only be an irritant from this point, but the court decided alimony was only fair. I wish she had actually had absolutely nothing. Anyway, because of the spousal support, I couldn't just throw her out of my life, like I hoped I would have been able to. So about once a month, she calls me and asks about the money. I always just send it, because I never want to deal with drama, and then I don't hear from her until the same time the next month, unless she's drunk, which has happened a few times. The final thing I had to do, which was probably a pretty nasty thing, considering everything was to buy an Alhambra bracelet. I probably wasn't going to wear it anywhere serious, and I had already saved a good amount towards it. So I bought it, took a picture of my wrist, blocked everyone but her from seeing my WhatsApp update, and then sent it out. It was much later that night before. She tried calling me. Needless to say, she didn't find it funny. She called me a lot of choice words, and I made sure to tell her that the picture was what she missed out on. I'm typically not that petty, so it felt so weird to me. I've since sold the bracelet and gotten a nice watch in its place. I don't know what the moral to the story is. Don't be a cheating wife. Don't be a cheating anybody. A moment of pleasure is never going to be better than a stable life. I hope she learns that the hard way. You're right. OP people act so entitled, like they deserve whatever they want, even if they hurt others along the way. It shouldn't be the case. But it is divorce itself is such a brutal process, and it can get so complicated and messy when both people aren't willing to be reasonable. I mean, you definitely don't go into a marriage thinking your partner is just going to throw it all away so easily. I get why you feel angry and want to get out of her life as fast as possible, protecting your own pace and moving forward is the best thing you can do right now. Hopefully with time, you'll be able to heal and rebuild your life on your own terms. Hang in there, OP. Do you have a similar story that you'd like to get off your chest? Share it with us in the comments, and thank you for joining us today on our space. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video. See you next time.